Why, hello everybody. My name is Steve Usher and a warm welcome to the Experience Designers podcast. So I want you to imagine you're on a train in the heart of Switzerland, looking over those pristine lakes, beautiful mountains, and all of a sudden it breaks down. Most of us would feel the frustration building and settling in. But what if that breakdown turned into one of the best customer experiences you've ever had? And on today's episode, John Sills shares how Swiss Rail transformed a moment of inconvenience into a memorable journey. Not through perfection, but through human connection and ownership. And John, a managing partner at the foundation, and author of The Human Experience, takes us deep into the heart of what truly makes experiences remarkable. And we'll explore stories that showcase the power of empathy, ambition, and yes, even AI, but more importantly, how businesses succeed when they put humans first. From the gap between leadership and frontline staff to the evolution of customer service, this episode is a powerful reminder of why human touch can never be replaced. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right, so John, welcome to the Experience Designers.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks. I'm loving this. I'm loving the statue over your shoulder as well. I meant to say the kind of mini Buddha.
My laughing Buddha. Yeah. It's my laughing Buddha. Yeah, it's very. I also have a Ganesha as well, an Indian, one of my favorite Indian gods. For removal of blockers. So yeah, it's good. You have to honor these things. Yeah. So just a quick, as you are joining the Experience Designers, and I've seen some of your LinkedIn posts, and you're similar to me actually with this, is when you're working in this field of experiences, you tend to have experience goggles on quite a lot, particularly day to day. I drive my wife mad with it, so I'd be curious to see how it works on your side. But a question for you. What's your have you come across like a favorite experience that you'd like to share, or an experience that you've come across recently that really popped? And what was it about it that really popped, and what was the situation?
No, luckily I've got quite a few, and it's really easy, isn't it, in our world to kind of focus on the negatives. And you're right, I'm exactly the same as you. Like, my wife just gets sick of me, you know. She knows, like, we do you know, this is a completely different answer to your question. I will come back to that. But we went away for my birthday a couple of years ago actually, it was after COVID, and she booked a really nice hotel for us, and it was in Stratford. It was really, really great trip. Hotel was really good, and as we went to check out, the receptionist said, "Oh, just before you go, can I just ask you, what would you rate the stay out of 10?" And you could feel my wife just kind of clench up and like go, "Oh no," and like straight away, because she knows I've got this kind of real hatred of like feedback requests. And I was just like, I'm not going to take what a question to ask, because if I say like anything other than 10, we're going to get into a really awkward conversation then of, what can we done differently? But straight away I could feel like clench my hand and just be like, come on, it's been a really nice trip, just come along and don't do anything. Obviously I did say something, but that wasn't what you asked. So my favorite ever experience was on Swiss Railways. It was just before COVID. I was working with a company called Great Rail Journeys, and they run railway holidays across Europe. So, you know, big tour groups, you know, and mainly kind of septuagenarians. It's more older people that go on these kind of trips. And I was lucky enough to be going on the first 2 days of a 10-day tour with them to Switzerland to kind of spend time with the customers, understand what the experience was like, what they could do to improve. And so there was like 30 of us piled on the train at St Pancras. The plan was go down to Geneva, get the train, change at Zurich, and then go on to our final destination. And that was all fine. Got on the train in Geneva, train pulls away, and about 10 minutes after it pulled away, the train broke down. And I was delighted, actually, because one of my colleagues was Swiss, and she'd been boasting about how brilliantly efficient Swiss Rail were. So I was straight on WhatsApp, like, you know, typical Swiss inefficiency, etc., etc. But then something strange happened. Like, after about 2 or 3 minutes after it had broken down and stopped, the train manager came down to speak to us. And he said, right, I know you're a big tour group traveling through our country and the train's broken down, and I'm really sorry about that. You might miss your onward connection. We don't know what the problem with the train is yet, but as soon as I know, and if I know it's going to have any impact on your journey, I'm going to come back. I'm going to let you know. Like, I'm going to look after you. So I'll let you know as soon as I know anything. Again, please accept the apologies for the inconvenience. And off he goes. And then 2 minutes later, we get a phone call from the head of operations at Swiss Rail, and they say, "Hey, I know you're a big group traveling through our country. I know the train's broken down. I'm really sorry about that. Your train manager is going to look after you. But if you need anything at all, here's my direct number. Just give me a call. I'll help you work it out." So about 15 minutes after that, the train starts moving again. True to his word, the train manager comes back down, says, right, this is what the problem was. This is how we fixed it. We're not expecting any more delays between now and Zurich, but you are going to miss your connection. I'm really sorry about that. This is the next train you need to get. This is the platform it's going to go from. But it's a big complex station. So when you get there, you're going to have a member of staff, and that member of staff's going to help make sure you get to the train. Again, please accept my apologies for the inconvenience. We get into a Zurich station. True to his word, the door opens. Right there is a member of platform staff with an umbrella. We follow around from platform 1 to platform 14, where the new train's already waiting for us. They've reserved us a carriage on the new train already, because we had one reserved on the old train. And as we got on, they gave us all tea and coffee vouchers to apologise for the inconvenience. Now, we ended up getting to our final destination about 25 minutes late.
No.
I'll be honest with you, Steve, if I get into London 25 minutes late on a Monday morning, I'm high-fiving the other commuters. Like, I'm hugging everyone. We don't know what to do with all the extra time we got in that day. And the difference to me was one of ambition. But it was a brilliant experience where you saw real ownership and, you know, essentially saying we've made a promise and we're not going to be able to deliver that promise. So we're going to do everything we can to help you get there as easly as possible. So it's a long answer to your question, but
that's an amazing. No, I love that. And you know, as you were sharing that story, these are the words I wrote down. Was human, ownership, empowerment, reaction, action, personal, outcome, explanation, support, next steps, promise, guidance. Yeah, that's a lovely.
All of those.
But interestingly, I think what's inherent in there is inherently human, right? It's that train manager who took ownership, had the autonomy to make decisions, clearly escalated it to that senior manager who then proactively reached out.
Wow. And it starts right from the point of them caring, even of them recognizing that this isn't okay, and wanting to be willing to care enough to do something about it, rather than just saying, well, nothing I can do, the train's broken down. So all of those things you said, that's right. And they're all the things that, you know, I believe that we're lacking quite a lot in experience at the moment. But when it comes together like that, I'm not even ever thinking about the fact the train broke down and we were slightly late. It's not even a consideration. It's not even, you know, you could ask me about that experience of going to Switzerland 1,000 times. I'm never going to mention the fact we were 25 minutes late. It just didn't matter in the end. And that's what it's really all about, I think.
So if we use this story, how would this story kind of encapsulate your passion and the work that you do? And has perhaps how it's given those goggles in which the way in which you see the world and the services and experiences that we encounter every day?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's one of those things, isn't it, where I think we're quite similar. It's kind of a natural thing. You don't necessarily choose it in a way. You just have a passion for it. I don't know about your background. I started on a market stall in Essex when I was kind of 14. You know, when I was a teenager, I had 2 or 3 jobs at the same time, working in shops. You know, Burton's and WH Smith's and all the kind of classics. I did the same at university when I was studying there. I was still working at Burton. So, you know, those quite formative years. Almost all of my working was frontline, working with real customers, real people. And I loved it. Like, I really loved it. And that's not to say there aren't annoying customers sometimes, but just that kind of back and forward with people, understanding people, being able to help people. There's that kind of real passion for it. And then when I started my career in HSBC, again, my first few years there were frontline, being a bank manager during the financial crisis. And not a good time, but a time where, again, you realize you can really help people, but you also see what this means to people, what it matters to people. And so I think for me, I've always kind of naturally got quite annoyed, I suppose, pleased when I see it done well, but quite annoyed with organizations that don't seem to care about their customers. And I think that's for 2 reasons. One is because I feel it's kind of taking people for granted. But the bigger reason is the quality of the experience we have affects the quality of our lives. It dictates the quality of our lives. And for me, we're all spending far too much time at the moment having emails ignored, not having phone calls answered, it being very, very difficult to contact organizations. There's some brilliant, brilliant customer experiences happening as well at the moment, and it's important that we recognize those.
I agree.
But the reality is, if you look at something like HMRC in the UK recently, I think they worked out it was something like, what was it? So 800 years, was that right? Something like that of human time had been spent on hold to them in that year. The amount of time, the amount of phone calls that people have been on hold and then just kind of hung up, because the average waiting time to have your call answered was over an hour. It's just an incredible amount of human time that's being wasted. And our life is so precious. So I think that's where the kind of passion comes from, to want to create great experiences for people.
Okay, just repeat that statistic for a minute. 800 human years.
I think it was 800 years of human time had been spent. It was something like 17 million hours or something like that. I can send you the article afterwards to fact check it. It was an unbelievable amount of time.
Yes.
And half of those calls were never answered. And that's just real people's real lives, when you could be playing with your kids, going for a run, watching Netflix, doing whatever you want. That's been spent. Whereas when you see organizations that really, an organization's purpose, in my mind, should be to make the world better for people, not in a grand purpose way, but just let's build a business that does something that makes other people's lives a bit easier. If you do that, you've got a good business.
Yes.
And it feels like the opposite of that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, time is the factor, isn't it? It's our time well saved or time well spent from an experience point of view. And I think that's the privilege of the work, right? Is that you're encoding and designing moments in time for people, and it's you want to make it a good one, of course, but it's that intentionality around that, I think, is really really important. So, John, we discussed some topics and some areas that we wanted to dive into as part of our prep for this podcast, and one of the things that I was really curious on, because you've done. There's some research that you guys have been doing, which was centered around state of nation or state of the nation in relation to customer service and experience. Like, what is that? What drove the company to do this report? What was the kind of the background to the work and the focus?
Yeah, that's right. So we've had, in the last 2 years, we've had a couple of books came out. So my business partner had a book come out 3 years ago called The Customer Copernicus, which was kind of top down, how you build customer-led organizations from the top. And then my book came out last year, which was The Human Experience, which is kind of how you create that human experience in organizations. And through both of those books, he's got us into lots of different conversations with lots of different people like yourself about what's really going on here. And it wasn't just customers, it was business leaders as well that we were starting to get into these interesting conversations with. That everyone kind of gets this sense that something's a bit broken. Everyone knows that it's a little bit broken at the moment. And we kind of felt that the traditional way of looking at this of just customer satisfaction doesn't really work. Even if you look at the Institute of Customer Services, biannual report, it just kind of bounces between 74% and 78%. It doesn't really tell the whole story. So we did this thing called a State of the Nation report on effectively being customer-led across the UK at the moment. And it gave us some really interesting findings. We got people to kind of rank their experiences at the moment from being kind of enragingly awful to wonderfully brilliant. And we saw that, 1 in 5 people had had an enragingly awful experience in the last 3 months. And, even more than that, I think it was 15% of people had had an enragingly awful experience in at least 6 areas of life over the last 3 to 6 months. So you're looking at kind of all kinds of different industries. We looked across 44 different industries for that. And you won't be surprised about the industries that were better or worse. It was interesting in the UK how bad the public services were currently being seen, as well as transport as well. Actually, banks were improved than where they might have been before. But I suppose, as well as that picture, the interesting thing for us was we went and spoke to 250 business leaders, CEOs and CMOs from across all of these different industries. And only 1 in 10 of those business leaders believes that their industry was currently delivering a great experience to customers. And that was a really shocking statistic to me. So you've got the people that are in charge of those businesses, almost entirely, 90% of them believe in their industry doesn't give a good experience, a great experience for their customers at the moment. And that was really interesting to us, because then you've got that disconnect, because they're all people that want to give a great experience, even if it's not their absolute priority, they want to give a great experience. So what's the disconnect? What's happening? What's not working? And I think there's a lot in here that we can dive into about this disconnect between leadership and the front line, and what's really getting in the way, because something is happening. Everyone feels it, everyone knows it, but it's not translating into customer decisions and the way that businesses are being run.
Oh my God, so much to unpack. Something getting in the way. That's really interesting. I'm seeing like a sandwich for some reason, and the kind of this middle gooey middle that's getting completely, I don't know, something's gone wrong. What are the indicators to that? Have you seen any kind of themes or threads to that, just to see where those disconnects are emerging? Is it a technology thing? Is it a process? Is it a strategy? Like, where's all the normal words we would use, of course, but is there anything else?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, and I think you have to kind of unpeel a few layers to get there. And we're still trying to work out the answer. I guess we've got a best hypothesis at the moment. So I think if you look back over the last 20 years, we've had all this incredible new technology come about that's allowed us to create some amazing experiences for customers. But it feels like over that last 20 years, we've used that technology to perfect, or try and perfect, the functional experience over the emotional experience. So trying to do more things in more ways, more quickly, more cheaply than ever before. And that last one is what really matters there, because a lot of organizations have seen, all of this great technology coming through as a way to deliver service to customers at a much lower cost. I put it on an app, put it on a website, stop people phoning up, stop people going into the branches, close down stores, put it all online. Now, there's an argument of convenience and function around that works. But I think the reality is, in doing that, we've stripped away, there's two things. We've stripped away all of that emotional connection with customers. So customers no longer feel they've got relationships with, organization. Imagine if you had a relationship with your partner and they said, okay, but from now on, you can only text me, you can't call me, you can't see me. Okay, not a great relationship. For most people, some people might be okay with that. But the second thing is, it's built this disconnect between leaders and I think the reality of what their customers are really experiencing. Because I think we've kind of got this, with technology, we have this kind of inherent belief that it's kind of perfect. We kind of believe we're going to design this app, we're going to design this process, and it's going to work, because it's not human, so it just works. This is where you get to like the post office scandal in the UK at the moment. They're kind of putting in a new system, and then refusing to believe that, in fact, actually part of the justice system until recently, that the law was, you presume the technology works unless you can prove otherwise. That was the law in the UK. You presume the technology works. And this is kind of quite inherent in this. And so what happens is customers fall into this pit of despair because the technology doesn't quite work. They try and phone up, they can't get hold of anyone. It becomes impossible to connect the organisation. So this is then, this is probably a whole other question, but this is then where this disconnect appears with leaders. Because so many more experiences digital, they're a lot more faceless. It's a lot harder for leaders to really connect with the experiences their customers are having, because they can't just go and hang out in a store like they used to. They can't just go and hang out in the shop like they used to, or in the branch like they used to, because it's not where the action's happening now. So the challenge for leaders in organizations is, how do they really connect with what matters to their customers and the experience that's really being given, which isn't just a load of data that comes in from a load of surveys that gets tagged them to the end of every experience. So I think that's the kind of flow which gets you to the heart of the problem we've got at the moment, which is a disconnect between leaders and organizations and the experience their customers are having.
Yeah, I agree. And also, just going back to, I'm going to go all the way back a little bit to you talking about customer satisfaction around how we're measuring some of this stuff as well. And interestingly, on the employee side, there was the latest, everybody hotly anticipates it, but then it comes out, which is the Gallup report around employee engagement. Yeah. And you read that, and for me, I don't know, I almost wrote a half angry post on it, because I was kind of like, surely we need to just stop measuring this stuff, because it's been the same for like 2 decades. If you had a metric in your business that remained the same for 2 decades, you would be questioning whether, is that actually the right thing we need to be measuring anyway, and are there other aspects we could be measuring that will serve us a little bit better? Same
exactly
as customer
that,
sat.
Exactly that, like that. The ICS, the ICS do longer work, but the ICS survey, the Institute of Customer Services survey, binding survey, For the last, since 2012, I think the lowest it's been is 73 and the highest it's been, I think, is 78, something like that. So even when they talk about dramatic rises and falls, it's always in there. And it's always in there because it shifts with expectations. So, customers are always roughly 7 out of 10 happy, like, because their expectations rise. No, so it's not useful. It's not useful information, really. It doesn't kind of get to the heart of it.
No,
But what it does, but then it becomes the challenge is in businesses, it's a logical way to measure. It's a bit like that no one gets fired for hiring IBM. Someone says, well, we want to understand our customers. And someone else says, well, let's survey them and say, you're happy. Yeah, kind of makes sense. But it doesn't make sense because it doesn't, the subtle difference is, and in the books, they were talking about the thin end of the wedge and the thick end of the wedge and how, the problem is if you imagine your customer's life as it's wedge shaped, at one end, you've got the thick end, you've got their real world, their real life, all the things that really matter to them, friends, family, job, home, dreams, ambitions, all the things they want to achieve. Then you've got the challenges, the things that get in the way, the services they use to help. And then right at the very thin end of the wedge, you've got the organization, you and your organization, a very tiny part of their overall consciousness. All of these surveys in this epidemic of feedback requests, all of these surveys are at the thin end of the wedge. What do you think about us? What do you think about our products? What do you think about our service? Would you recommend us? They're all very inside out. And the danger with this deluge of information coming in is that it convinces leaders they're close to what matters to their customers, whereas in truth, they're only close to what matters to what they're only close to customers' opinions of their business.
It's
a very, it's a very subtle but significant difference as to whether you really understand their customers or whether you just understand what they think of you. And it's overwhelming amount of data and it makes sense. So people just go along with it and everyone measures it. So it feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah, I love that. That's a very important learning for any listeners there or any kind of perspective. Just a small shift can make a huge difference in those insights. John, can I just ask as well? So I've lived away from the UK now 8 years now, and I kind of grew up around the customer service industry in the UK, entered into it like late 90s and then into the 2000s. So I saw that evolution from that customer service reaction, typical, even through postal stuff, dare I say, customer complaints, then into kind of that more kind of, customer experience, that fluffy word of customer experience and how it can bring value into the organization and it actually evolve as a discipline in itself. So I relate to this in terms of the journey in which the industry, particularly in the UK, is on, and no doubt globally. And I do also remember, now again, I'd love to just get your thoughts on this. Back then, we had like First Direct, and First Direct was like the mecca of customer service, how they delivered, the way in which they engaged their customer. It was much more on that emotional level. Virgin was a classic. I mean, Virgin, all of its brands, they all were always different. They were always that one step above. Their tonality, the way they engage customers were on a different level. Some beautiful stories of, I think there was an engineer that fitted, I think some broadband or something of an elderly individual near Christmas, and actually went back on Christmas Day because he was living on his own with a TV for him because his TV broke, and bought it himself. So there's all these like beautiful examples. But has that been eroded? Because this is a number of years ago now. Are we seeing erosion in some of those brands generally that we used to hold up as this kind of poster companies that deliver great service and experiences? How has it evolved?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually. I think the world shifts around all of these businesses, doesn't it? And there's probably every business can only exist for a while being a kind of challenger. I think First Direct's a really interesting one. I know it well, having been at HSBC previously. Their original ethos of pioneering great experiences, great customer experiences, and they're still hugely customer led, and they still do an incredible amount of good work. However, where First Direct has found its challenges in much of the rest of the banking industry is trying to be the best of the other banks. And it managed to be best of the other banks for a very long time. And then because it was looking over there to the left, over on the right, all of a sudden you've got Monzo and Starling and Revolut just coming out of nowhere because they weren't looking at how to be the best bank. They were looking at how to be the best tech company. So they completely changed their frame of reference. So First Direct is still doing very, very well, still very, very high customer satisfaction and customer experience. But there's a really interesting challenge, I think, for any organization in any industry of how do you keep your perspective broad enough that you can keep challenging yourself and not just focus on being the best in your industry, because the real disruption always comes outside of that. The likes of Virgin, I think, has fallen away. But with Virgin, it's very difficult because they've got so many brands.
Yes.
It's across so many. So, Virgin Media is regularly sent to me as an example of giving a terrible experience. But Virgin Airways is still pretty good. Sadly for me, Virgin Records, I don't think exists anymore. It's where I bought most of my CDs when I was younger. So you start to kind of get out that brand stretch. But then you get every industry has this kind of recycling, like Octopus Energy are my current favorite, customer experience organization where, they've gone into an industry that just kind of said, well, we can't really do any better. This is just what it is. Our hands are tied. What do you expect? We used to be nationalized. Prices are going up. We can do what we can do. And Octopus Energy came in and said, it's just not good enough. And actually, their story is fascinating. Right from the start, they co-authored an investigation with the BBC on unfair trading practices in the energy industry. That was their kind of opening shot to welcome them into the energy industry, because they were just saying, they just had that passion and that ambition to say, it's just not good enough. People are being ripped off. Yeah, and now they're the biggest energy provider in the UK. They are the highest satisfaction. They've won the Which Awards, I think, 7 years in a row. They've built a great technology platform to build on. But they do some really nice things, like the hold music. I don't know if you know about this. If you phone up Octopus Energy, song that plays will be a song that was #1 when you were 14 years of age. And there's this really, really lovely story of how it came about. They do this thing called Friday Night Dinner, and everyone in the company jumps on a Slack call at the same time. And they just talk. There's no hierarchy. They just talk. And someone on the front line said, look, people are really fed up with that whole music. I've had so many complaints about it this week. They're fed up. Is there anything we can do? Someone else said, well, can't we like personalize it somehow or do something that will make it a bit better? And an engineer was on the call and he said, yeah, we can do that. Actually, we can do like an API through from Spotify. We can probably do some kind of personalization, but what are we going to personalize? And someone else just piped up and said, oh, I read this magazine article last week that said people most connect with music when they're about 14 years of age. And we've got people's dates of birth, right? We asked to have people's dates of birth. Within a week, they'd spun it up. Within 2 weeks, it was live. And the thing is, so mine would be the Fugees. Killing me softly. If I'd been born a year later, it would have been Spice Girls Wannabe. So I'm secretly gutted about that. And the thing is, you might not like the song. You might not necessarily like the song, but you will recognize it. And what I love about it is it shows, and what I love is it shows a bit of respect. It shows respect that if you're going to phone us up and you're going to have to be on hold because we can't answer the phone quick enough, we're at least going to play you a song that resonates with you and maybe, hopefully, you might like. And at the very least, it's going to be different to some kind of god-awful list music. It shows respect rather than taking for granted people's time that they're going to phone up and just be on hold, and that's just the way it is. So there's some new players coming through now that are starting to challenge, but normally it's outside of the industry. You have to look to know if you're still being as good as you can be for customers.
Yeah, I love that. Just with this case in point with Octopus and perhaps some others that you might be aware of, what some of those kind of characteristics or behaviors, because you've looked at kind of there are some distinct behaviors, and are there any that resonate with Octopus maybe we can pull out, or others that show what makes a great experience for customers? Are there any? Yeah,
that's right. I mean, I'm quite, even though I'm a consultant, so I'm the foundation, and we work with organizations but on their experience and their strategy, but even though I'm a consultant, I'm not a big fan of frameworks. I don't, so when it comes to customer experience, I don't really believe there's like one perfect set of features that's the same for every company in every industry around the world. But having said that, as I was writing the book, I did go and study a whole load of companies like Octopus that I think do this really well. Right. And they did all have these kind of same human traits in common in terms of the experience that they delivered for customers. So, and they were, won't name them all, but they were things like being very accessible, very easy to contact, being very flexible. They were very proactive when they spotted something was going wrong. They were very respectful. They were very responsible if something happened, that kind of ownership we talked about earlier. And they were really straightforward. They used kind of straightforward human language in the way that they spoke. And what kind of struck me is I was kind of starting to spot these traits and write about them. Because actually, it's not different from a human relationship. Again, if you think about a relationship with a partner, would you want them to be accessible? Would you want to be able to contact them? Well, yeah, you wouldn't have a great relationship with someone if they refuse to answer the phone all the time. Would you want them to be responsible and take responsibility for having the stuff they haven't done, like the washing up? Yeah. Would you want them to be respectful of you, or as a human? Absolutely. Would you want them to be flexible if you had a bad day at work or you wanted to change some plans? Yeah, you would. Would you want them to speak to you in a kind of down to earth, straightforward way? Yeah, absolutely. So and consistent is one of the other ones. Would you want do you want a partner that's consistent so that when you get home every day, the kind of conversations you're going to have? Or would you want someone that's wildly erratic and, speaks an entirely different way to you on text to the phone, or promises one thing and then is completely different? Of course not. So if you start to think about our organizations, our relationships with organizations like a real relationship, you start to realize how so many of the behaviors we're seeing at the moment just don't make sense, because you just wouldn't accept them. You wouldn't accept them in a real relationship with someone. So yeah, it's those kind of human traits that kind of kept coming out. And look, Sam, it's not a framework necessarily, but I do believe that if organizations exhibit those kind of human traits and human behaviors, the experience naturally becomes much better for everybody involved, including colleagues.
Yeah, that's amazing. As you were sharing those, flexible, accessible, proactive, respectful, responsible, straightforward, consistent, I'm fairly hard pressed to actually say, this company lives up to that, or all of them. Quite having a few challenges there with that, and I think perhaps reinforces your point around, the emotional element with customers. So I think it's what can companies do to move the needle on this? I mean, I know there's a million and one ways, of course, and there's the complexity, very contextual to the organizations. But are there maybe some key elements around the difference between an organization that's more customer-led versus one that's, not?
Yeah.
And are there elements like embedded into that business that really translate well into those kind of outcomes?
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, there's a longer answer and the shorter answer. I mean, the short answer is, what's interesting, I think, about a lot of these things is those human traits. They're all things that we learn from the day we're born, how to be a human. And actually, a lot of organizations, these are learned behaviors to not be this way.
Yeah.
So, just as a small example, if you think about straightforward and talking in a human language, well, that's what we do. That's what we do. Like me and you now, we're talking in normal words. If we went to the pub, we'd talk in normal words. But all of a sudden, if you were working in a contact center and I was your customer, you'd start talking to me in a different way, because you've been taught to talk to me in a non-human way. It's a bit like you open up your laptop in the morning and you start emailing people, and you email in a different language. Dear so-and-so, I hope this email finds you well. Like, who says that? I hope this email finds you well. What does that even, that's my least favorite. What does that even mean? Like, how can an email find, what are you want? Kind regards, kindest regards, we all do it.
Yeah.
We just start writing in this language. So there is a broader point, which is we all just need to unlearn these corporate behaviors and just be human, right? Just be the people we are. So that's the short answer.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think I just do want to reinforce that, because it's like, even though I wrote the book about it, I do try and stress I don't think it's rocket science. It's hard because of the way organizations have learned to be, but it's not I'm not suggesting anything kind of massively radical. I'm just suggesting to be human, like be the human you spent your life to be. But there are things that get in the way. So to your point, I also looked at the culture of these organizations that do it well. And again, they did have these things in common. There's an overarching thing. They're all very good at seeing the world from the outside in, escaping that kind of natural inside out pool of being inside your own organization. And that manifests in a few ways. And they're very, very connected with their customers. So the likes of City Mapper, for example, if they're going to open up in a new city, they'll take a cross section of their team and they'll go and live in that city for a month, and they'll move Airbnb every 2 days. So they get to experience what life is really like traveling through the city, not just what the data tells them. So they're very, very good. Same as Chiltern Railways. They get all of their senior leaders to live somewhere on the Chiltern Railways rail line, so they have to use their own service every day. So real connection to customers. They all have a real focus on moments that matter. They all have real freedom in their teams. I mean, this is one of the biggest things, just kind of empowerment to let their
Yes.
people be human and then
Yes.
deal with any mistakes they make afterwards, rather than restrict them with scripts and processes and force them to behave in a way that frankly is frustrating to customers and for colleagues. We've all
Yes.
been in those conversations where both people on the phone know what the common sense answer is, but they're just not allowed to do it. So real kind of empowerment in their teams to go and do the things that are right. And then there's all kind of great stories around things that people have done with that. But do you know what there's perspective as well, looking outside your own industry, like we talked about before. But do you know the
Mm.
biggest thing I found really interesting was kind of just ambition. I mean, this is such an obvious thing to say. The companies that give the greatest experiences are the companies that care the most about giving the greatest experiences. They've got a real burning ambition. And one of the things I probably enjoyed most about when I was interviewing these CEOs of these organizations I studied was how, when I started asking them about what their customer experience strategy was, how nearly all of them just looked at me in a really kind of quizzical way. It was like, well, like, what do you mean? Like, why would you need a customer experience strategy? Like, obviously that's the most important thing. You just want to be brilliant for customers. Like, I don't need a customer experience team. It was really interesting actually. And Guy
Mm.
Singh Watson, who heads up Riverford, he got quite animated about it in a brilliant way. And he said, if leaders aren't spending at least a day a week with their customers, what on earth are they doing that they think is more important to the future of their business?
Yeah.
And I just love the simplicity of it, because
Yeah.
it sums up to me everything that we've kind of got wrong at the moment, that we have to have back to the floor days or set up sessions for CEOs to grab an hour a week to speak to customers. Your business only survives by earning customer decisions in your favor. So what
Yes.
on earth are you doing that's more important? So there was this really nice connection with all these leaders of really caring about it and being ambitious about it, but not understanding the mindset that it wouldn't matter, because of
Mm.
course it matters. Of course it matters. And yeah, so few
I
things.
love that. Yeah, because there's examples. I think was it Sainsbury's that used to do that? I think with managers, they
Mm.
had to spend time. I think it was Christmas or certain periods out
Morrison's do the
in,
same.
yeah,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
Morrison, yeah, out on the retail on the floor, stacking shelves. I think closing that gap is really really important. I just want to also loop back to this word as well, because I think you touched on it around the perception of surveys, because surveys, don't get me wrong, like companies, there are companies doing great surveys, and there's definitely a good way and not so good way of engaging customers with
mm,
surveys, of course, but they're also perceived as this, oh well, we are getting close to our customer because, to your point, we're asking how is the experience. What's the How do you kind of shift that, because we've got it into more of a transactional way of engaging customers because it's easy and it's quick and we just get some data on a screen and we can make some assumptions, and
yeah,
whereas rather than go and spend the time there with them and actually immerse yourself in that moment of the customer experience,
yeah,
where's
yeah,
that? I mean, there's kind of two very different distinct ends, aren't they?
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think in a way there's three bits actually. So
Mm.
if you think about the kind of what we focus on at the moment is transactions, getting people's
Mm.
opinions of transactions. And actually, the other two elements of that are about relationships and real lives. So, you need to understand people's transactions with you. That's at the thin end of the wedge. That's important to
Mm.
understand, albeit, from my mind, you can understand most of that with the data that you've got. So you shouldn't
Mm.
need to ask people, how easy was it to cancel a standing order, for example, because you can just see from the online data if they've done it or not. If someone spent 5 minutes on that website, they've not done it, or if you've got people hanging up the phone because you're not answering, you don't need to ask them if they're happy. You can tell. So transactions at one end. In the
Mm.
middle, you need to understand relationships. How do they feel about you? How do they feel about the industry? How do they feel about other organizations that they work with? So, what are the relationships they've got with services that they use to help them? And what do those relationships mean? And what does a good relationship look like? And then
Mm.
the thick end of the wedge, you need to understand their real lives. And this is where innovation comes from, understanding real people's real lives, what's challenging them every day, jobs they're trying to achieve, and what can you do to help. Now, to do that, we think that's all about real customer immersion. And this is really what we do as an organization. We take leaders and CEOs and CMOs and we get them to go and spend real time with real customers
Yes.
in their homes, go shopping with them, go cooking with them, all kinds of things. Go and experience, do online diaries, video diaries. Track them for a month, see how they spend their money, spend real time understanding people's real lives, and constantly bring that information back into the organization, expose people to that information, because that's where then if you've got that, you can have the surveys and you can have the relationships part. It's fine to have those, but they need to be part of an overall suite of information that's coming together to help you build the picture. Partly to give you a great experience, a better experience, but like I say, partly it's about innovation. Great ideas don't come from asking people, what do you think about our service? Great ideas come from understanding people's lives and spotting the areas where you can help that they're not currently being helped.
Yeah, agree. I think also there's an added context into this, and this is also an employee experience as well as customer, is also like generational. And in the workspace or in the workplace environment, I did a piece on actually the keynote recently around Generation Z, and I'm not a big one on the labels, but I did stand on stage and I said, this group deserve our attention more than probably many others before, just because the sheer number of them. And and I think something like 50% of the workforce will be Gen Z by, I think, the next 3-4 years, something like that. It's huge. And it's like a tidal wave. So if you're thinking of, our customers are changing, rapidly. And if you're not on top of that, you're going to fall behind very, very, very quickly, very quickly.
This is exactly it. And it's time in memoriam, I suppose. It's always been this way, hasn't it? That leaders, the irony is, by the time you become a leader, you're kind of so inside the organization, both away from your customers, but also your time is just taken up, spent with your own business decisions with the regulator. So the point where you have the most influence on your customers is the point where you're furthest away from your customers. I mean, still, I really like your point. So what I'm really interested in actually is the overall picture of demographics over the next 10, 20 years. Because you're right, we've got this tidal wave coming through at one end, but at the other end, we've got a massive group of people that aren't going anywhere, that are still going to be working for a long time, that have still got a huge amount of wealth. And I've always been I remember when I was in the bank, it always used to be focus on millennials. And there'd be one hand go up at the back of the room and go, well, hang on, what about the over 50s? Because they've got all the money.
They do.
And we're the bank, so shouldn't we be helping them? But it's just not cool. So that's going to be, I think, it's a really interesting challenge for organizations.
It is.
And this kind of approach, I suppose, a lot of organizations have had of trying to be all things to all people, I think it's got to go. Like, I think we are just going to start to see more niche organizations. Maybe there's more than I'm giving credit for, but, where's the bank just for the over 50s?
Yep.
And gender, where it just goes, do you know what? Don't come to us till you're over 50. But when you do, we're the bank to you. Or vice versa, where's the bank to the under 30s? Maybe it's Monzo, who knows? But where you kind of go, we're with you till 30, and then we're going to hand you off to another organization that does this better for you. And you're going to see it in all kinds of different areas. I suppose it's the classic 18 to 30s travel versus retirement holiday travel. Saga. Yeah, that's exactly it. Actually, there's an article in that, isn't there? Right. That's the 18 to 30 and Saga. That's going to be on steroids over the next 20 years. Yeah. So how does that look across all these other industries? Because it's going to need to happen. It's going to need to happen. Otherwise, you can't. Everyone's going to fail.
Yeah, and we have, I think, the biggest transfer of wealth going to happen over the next 10 years. I think it was, especially in the US. It's trillion. I mean, it's an insane amount of money. So that
none coming to me.
No. So it's we could set up a fund. You never know. There was just a thing also I just wanted to mention, and this thing around ambition. Just want to come back to that, and this kind of core burning ambition. And it's really interesting because to your point, and yes, there's a lot of good stuff going on. I'm definitely, that's why I asked you at the beginning, what's a good experience? So there are really good examples. However, it is amongst a sea of very ordinary experiences as well, particularly where you've got the 1 in 10 stat with the leaders, etc., believing that their industry's delivering great experience. So surely if you are, a smart individual spotting a business opportunity, if everybody's over there, or majority is over there with a very average, ordinary C over there just bobbing away, and there's an opportunity to go in completely the other direction and create a business that excels in this area and puts this very much at the heart, surely it's common sense to be, well, you are going to reap the business and performance and outcome results
Yeah.
as a part of that, whilst also fixing some stuff that needs fixing and delivering great experience for customers.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing as well. Surely we should be seeing more
Well,
people investing in this.
it should be,
Obvious
but
question, but yeah.
yeah. I mean, this is so one of the things in the book I talk about are these myths, and one of those is the myth of return on investment. And I find this really interesting because it seems obvious, but it's not necessarily obvious, because what happens at the moment is organizations broadly still ask for business cases of why we should do things that's going to make life better for customers. And actually, sometimes that can be hard to quantify. Like, you don't know.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to take risks. Like, there's a great story of Tesco and Sainsbury's back in the day. And, you know, when Tesco decided to do one in front queuing. So if you had more than one person in front of you on the till, they'd open another till. That was like their big, grand statement. But they didn't know that's going to mean people are going to buy more. For them, people might buy exactly the same amount, but they just need more people on the till, and it could just be cost. But what they did know was, if they had to do it, if they did it, Sainsbury's would copy them. So net, they'd be the same against Sainsbury's. So it kind of worked out. But sometimes you have to have these moments of belief, as my colleague Charlie calls them. You have to have these leaps of faith, where you just believe that those things are going to make you more money. However, whilst that's an argument for doing it, for me, there's a much bigger argument for why you should focus on improving customer experience. And that is that bad customer experience is very, very expensive to provide.
Yeah.
So the most efficient organizations are also the ones that provide the best customer experience. And that is, you know, constantly, in the same way that those with the happiest employees give the best customer experience. It's almost a universal truth. And that's because they reduce failure demand. They reduce all of those repeat phone calls, all of those letters, all of those complaints, all of the rework, all of the stuff that comes with giving a bad experience. You know, I worked with one energy company a while ago, and 33% of all the calls coming into their contact center were repeat phone calls from people that had phoned up the day before and weren't happy with the answer they'd been given. So actually, you know, improving your customer experience dramatically reduces the cost on your business. Because you get rid of all of that failure demand. And that's the business case I don't see made often enough, while we're all trying to show how this is going to make us money. So get that, just show how it's going to save you money. And then an added effect is more people buy more stuff from you as well.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm going to bring up this word. It's you might have heard of it. It's pretty prominent out there right now. Artificial intelligence, AI. Yeah. I've purposely left it towards the end of our discussion because I'm not a skeptic. I'm not overly positive either. I'm on the fence, observing and testing, as we all should be. There are some use cases coming out which are interesting, but of course I do look at those with a little bit of a pinch of salt, even if the metrics and all the data's there and the savings and all this stuff, because we are in this early stage adoption area. What's your sense? Let's just dive into your perspective on AI, particularly in service sector. Some interesting.
I'd say it's fascinating. I mean, we've had versions of it around in the past and versions in the future. I'm really positive and excited about the possibilities of it. I still think it's a long way away from being there. I think, you know, if you're going to use it, it needs to be kind of foolproof. And it's nowhere near that. For me, it's going to be most useful supporting people to give a better experience. So there's been some quite interesting studies done already that show that, you know, if you use AI to support a call center advisor that's kind of new in the role, it will help improve their performance and customer satisfaction by like 30 or 40%. Really big impact, because it's saving them time in trying to find the right answer, more likely to get the right answer. If that AI support is used for someone that's been in the role for several years, no difference at all, because the person's already upskilled enough to know what they're doing. So there's kind of, I think for me, it's a really interesting way it's going to be used, which is in supporting people to give a better experience. I don't see a world where people are kind of phoning up happy to kind of speak to a kind of AI voice on the phone. Albeit I know some people listening will say that's naive of me to say that, so that's not really what it's about. So really big S4. I can definitely see it making a massive improvement to chatbots that, let's be honest,
we're seeing
never been a quality where they should be used.
No.
You know, it's a great example of...
Never really took off. Well, they took off, but never really punched, I thought, chatbots.
It's a great example where organisations have just seen the pound signs and the cost savings and decided to go for it. and it's just terrible. I mean, I've had plenty where I've been trying to join an organization and the chatbot's made it hard for me to join as well. So, so I do think we'll see a big improvement in chatbots that can be pretty much AI driven that will really help. I think we'll see a big improvement in support for people having customer conversations. Where I think you'll always need a human is where people aren't happy.
Yeah.
Or there's something complex and they need explaining. There's a great article I read about this the other day, which is, and I think you have to go on the name, it's bio something, I'll send you it afterwards, this theory, but it's essentially this human nature, this innate need to know you've been heard by another living thing, by another human. And I think there's real value in that if you want to, if I want to complain, I want to know another person's heard me. Even if they then use AI to help them sort it out, it doesn't matter. When you phone up a company, you've got a problem, you've got that 30-second script in your head that you've been rehearsing because you're angry.
Yes.
I just want someone to hear it and them to go, got it, really sorry, heard it, let me help you sort it. The rest of that can be dealt with AI. But you need that moment. And when people are like that, they're not going to be happy dealing with a kind of an automated intelligence, particularly when they, artificial intelligence, particularly when they feel like they're unique as well. Everyone thinks their problem is unique. So like, well, mine can't be dealt with like that because it's different. Of course, it's not different. So I think these different areas mean that AI means these kind of automated procedures. It's not going to quite work. I think AI is going to be used in very good ways, but there's going to be some specific things you're still going to want that contact.
Yeah, I think there's, just to build on that, I think there's an area around, I mean, particularly in contact centers, where you've got layered systems, particularly if there's been mergers, acquisitions, multi-layer systems, different interfaces for the agent, for an example, or just how to get access to data quickly. I think it will move through that a lot quicker. I think that's one thing I have heard in terms of it being able to be this kind of GUI or at least connector to the data, bring it together in a much more efficient and quicker fashion. I think Klarna released something recently. They did a test run. I've actually got to it had 2.3 million conversations, 2/3 of Klarna's customer service chats. And they actually saw a leading to a 25% drop in repeat inquiries. Across multiple languages. Yeah, I mean,
that's
great.
Exactly the kind of thing. Did you see this thing about SoftBank last week? Right?
No.
Counter. So the counterpoint,
Go on.
or the counter use is SoftBank have released an AI. They're testing an AI that will change the tone of a customer's voice if the customer is angry. So the agent won't have to deal with hearing people be angry at them and the abuse. It will kind of soften the tones that the customers are using. Now, there's a couple of things in this. Firstly, it's interesting they're investing in AI to make people sound less angry rather than investing to actually improve the experience so that people aren't angry in the first place. Secondly, I get it because, it's really not good for agents at the moment to have angry customers, but, to respond in the right way, you need to know how a customer.
You need to know where they are, meet them where they are. Yeah.
Yeah. And thirdly, I think the third weird thing is actually, I don't think that's better. I mean, I think there's probably nothing more sinister than someone that's being very angry, but saying it in a very calm, cool voice. I think that'd be almost psychotic. It'd be horrible, wouldn't it? So I'm not sure it actually helps the problem at all. But that's where you get that balance, right? That's where Klarna doing it brilliantly. SoftBank, you're like, is that the answer to the problem? I'm not sure it is.
Is it not going to challenge the customers to see just how irate they can behave, to see just how much it can be filtered, or how can they become so irate that it filters through something at the top?
Yeah, well, the customers will start using an AI that understands that AI and they'll be having an argument with each other. So yeah.
Amazing. John, just some thoughts, just to close off. Just how do people connect into you? Also just your book. Just a little bit about the book and where people can. I can put links in the show notes and stuff like that as well.
Happy to self promote. So I'm managing partner of the foundation. We're a customer-led growth consultancy in London, but we work around the world helping organisations to customer experience, customer strategy, innovation work, helping them build customer-led organizations, do customer-led things. The book, The Human Experience, came out last year. It's available pretty much everywhere. Good bookshops, and if not, I've got a stack here I can send out to people. Online, again, I'm pretty much everywhere, but mainly most active on LinkedIn. I find that the most where I have the most interesting conversations. So I'm John J. Sills on LinkedIn, and I have a Substack newsletter that's also on LinkedIn.
Oh, cool.
That's CX Stories, and that's my Instagram handle as well, where I post stuff. So, but yeah, if you go to my LinkedIn, all the links to the book, the Instagram, the newsletter, etc., that's all on there. So yeah, John J. Sills is the thing to Google.
Perfect, and I'll put all the links in the show notes as per usual. And actually, I think it was actually somebody that we know in Amsterdam who connected us. But I think. Yeah, as soon as I saw the book Human Experience, I was like, yeah, John, it definitely needs to come on the show, given the podcast is about human experiences. But no, I really enjoyed the perspective. It's nice to connect back into the UK for a morning and have a conversation, which always feels good. Gives me a little bit of a home feel. I think I've taken a lot from it. I think it's super interesting. I think for me, still, human is at the core. And I think, anyone listening, and I think the work that we do, albeit in respectively different areas, still anchors. We have to be this kind of anchor and this counterbalance to AI. I think AI and tech is really important. I'm not negative towards it, but I am also here to argue the human. And I think in order for us to get the best out of this stuff, we've got to ground so much deeper in the human, what we want it to be, and what our customers or employees want. So I feel so much alignment, even if the word customer, employee, just swap that round, but principally mindset-wise, very, very similar.
It's all people, it's all humans.
It is.
All humans. So brilliant. Well, thanks for coming on, Steve. I really enjoyed it.
John, thanks so much, and great to connect with you, and thanks again for joining. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
And there we have it, another episode of the Experienced Designers podcast. In this one, we've journeyed through broken trains, Swiss efficiency, and even dabbled in AI, all to uncover what really makes a great experience. Massive thanks to John Sills for reminding us that in a world of tech and automation, being human is still the ultimate superpower. And if you loved what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and maybe even share your own crazy customer experience story. We know there's plenty out there to choose from. So until the next time, keep designing those unforgettable moments and stay curious.